Andrew Hoggard, you've both been wonderful. Thank you so much for today. My name's Wallace Chapman. 3:45 back tomorrow for Power Battle Friday. Stay with RNZ. More about the cyclone on Checkpoint with Lisa Owen.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere aki nei, Gabrielle is on the way and she's nasty. The cyclone could bring high winds and heavy rains. Emergency services are warning Aucklanders be ready to go alone for 3 days. The Deputy Mayor is live and the Super City's new minister joins us too. He reckons the clean-up could be well north of $1 billion. Looking for a rental car in Auckland? Well, hen's teeth or a winning lotto ticket could be easier to find, we'll explain. The struggle is real, that from a minimum wage cleaner aspiring to the living wage. Are you piggybacking on someone else's Netflix subscription? Well, stand by for an eviction notice. You can watch us live on the RNZ website.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Kia ora, I'm Marama Tipole. Auckland is bracing for yet another massive storm as Tropical Cyclone Gabrielle heads towards New Zealand. It's expected to reach the upper North Island on Sunday and be at its worst on Monday and Tuesday, with possibly up to 200 millimetres of rain over 24 hours in Northland and Auckland and up to 300 in Coromandel. The state of emergency in Auckland has just been extended by another week. It was due to be lifted tomorrow. The Mayor Wayne Brown is urging people to prepare for the storm, which could fell trees and cause power outages. Auckland Emergency Management says it's ready to increase the number of evacuation centres around the region for people to seek shelter. Auckland Council is warning residents not to put any more rubbish on the curb with Cyclone Gabrielle on the way. Water-damaged furniture is still on the streets in several Auckland suburbs awaiting pickup. Deputy Mayor Desley Simpson says the cyclone could sweep it up and block waterways.
The big Auckland clean-up has just become that much more urgent. You know, it's very clear, rather, that we have to get this curbside rubbish away as soon as possible before the storm comes. And if you have a trailer, please call that 0800 number and volunteer your services, because I think that would be very useful.
Coromandel's popular Cathedral Cove attraction has been closed because continuing rockfalls and slips make it too dangerous for visitors. And the Department of Conservation says with a cyclone on the way, there is potential for further erosion and greater risk to safety. The leaders of Labour and National have traded barbs, duking it out over the government's policy bonfire. Both Chris Hipkins and Christopher Lawson visited Tauranga today in an early taste of the election campaign to come. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCullum.
Mr Luxon's not holding back in his assessment of the policy purge, labelling it a total shambles and cynical politics. He's accused the Prime Minister of Jedi mind tricks and trying to claim he's had nothing to do with all the projects being dumped. Mr Hipkins in turn says National is devoid of ideas and just likes to whinge and moan. Yesterday's reset saw the RNZ-TVNZ merger axed and work on income insurance and hate speech kicked down the road.
A judge is deliberating whether GNS Science should be tried alone for alleged health and safety breaches at Whakaari-Waita Island. 47 people were on the crater when it erupted in December 2019. 22 died then or later from extreme burns and blast injuries. The Crown Research Institute is one of 12 parties facing a 4-month trial this year, alongside tourism companies. This morning, lawyers argued GNS was vulnerable to collateral attacks from other defendants on trial together. But Christy McDonald KC, acting for WorkSafe, says that's incorrect.
To do a great disservice to the complexity of the evidence in relation to GNS and its importance to the main trial. The analysis, again with respect to Ms Reid, has been superficial and it's not right.
Judge Evangelos Thomas will give a decision tomorrow. A tech commentator says Netflix's crackdown on account sharing could mean more people illegally stream and download TV shows and movies. Netflix is making changes to stop multiple people accessing one account. They'll be rolled out in Aotearoa from today, following a year-long trial in Latin America. Paul Spain, who is also Gorilla Technologies chief executive, says it'll change the way people consume media.
Ultimately, the tighter controls that Netflix puts in around account sharing, the more that people are quite likely to exit the platform and decide to source their media elsewhere, whether in illegal or legal manners.
Paul Spain says other streaming platforms are already tight on account sharing rules. It's 5:04. In sport, having enjoyed 10 Test wins in less than a year in charge of England Test cricket side, former Black Caps captain Brendan McCullum doesn't intend changing his approach. McCullum's found a simple recipe for success as the side prepares for 2 Test series against New Zealand starting next week in Mount Maunganui. It's been labelled baseball, but McCullum believes it simply comes down to having fun.
Walk around the dressing room at trainings or wherever they go, they've got smiles on their faces and they're laughing and joking, and when they put their head down and start working, they put in the yards, and then it's a matter of being able to, in precious situations, be brave enough to allow that talent and that hard work and the enjoyment factor to come out.
Northern Districts will play defending champs Canterbury in the men's Super Smash T20 Grand Final on Sunday after Northern eliminated Otago in a 16-run weather-reduced match in Dunedin this afternoon. The Southern Steel have suffered a major blow just weeks out from the start of the ANZ Netball Premiership, with shooter George Fisher ruled out with a season-ending knee injury. The England international ruptured her ACL during a pre-season match against the New South Wales Swifts in Invercargill on Sunday. It also rules her out of the World Cup in July. And Real Madrid are through to football's World Cup final after a 4-1 win over Egypt's Al Ahly in Morocco. Real will play Saudi Arabia's Al Hilal in the final on Monday. That's the news.
A cyclone tracks towards Northland.
If there does come to be a heavy rain warning issued for their area, then sandbagging doesn't seem like a silly idea to me.
And this advice from the Whangarei Mayor.
Clean the drains, make sure the drains are prepared for the storms, because if you've got blocked drains, that's when you have a lot of flooding issues.
Desperate conditions in quake-hit Syria.
If people don't die because of the earthquake, they will die because of the hunger or freezing coldness.
The major stories covered. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
RNZ National funded through New Zealand on air. Lisa Owen and Checkpoint next. But right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. For Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, isolated showers clearing today but returning tomorrow with cloud increasing. Now for Waikato to Manawatu, including Bay of Plenty in the central high country, isolated showers mainly in the afternoons and evenings. For Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, a few showers developing this evening, possibly heavy about the ranges today, clearing for Hawke's Bay tomorrow. Horowhenua to Wellington, also Wairarapa, Marlborough and Nelson. A few showers developing but clearing from the east this evening and from Nelson tomorrow. Bulla and Westland mainly fine. Isolated coastal showers for today, moving inland for a time tomorrow. For Canterbury and Otago, isolated showers today, mainly fine for tomorrow, but isolated showers returning south of Christchurch from the afternoon. For Southland and Fiordland, a few showers mainly about the coast and Stewart Island, and for the Chatham Islands, fine spells with 1 or 2 showers today. It's 7 minutes past 5.
Nā mihi marama, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Aucklanders, be prepared to get by on your own for 3 days. That's the advice from Emergency Management. Cyclone Gabrielle is off the coast of Australia and could be heading towards New Zealand, potentially bringing heavy rain and high winds to an already sodden Auckland. The state of emergency in the city has been extended for another week. Forecasters say it's too early to know the storm's exact path, but it could reach Aotearoa late this week or early next. And depending on the severity, authorities are warning there could be power cuts and further damage. Well, joining us now is Auckland Deputy Mayor Desley Simpson. Kia ora, Desley. There's still a lot of rubbish piled up on berms around the city. What is the council doing now to get rid of this with more weather on the way?
Kia ora, Lisa. Look, the big clean-up, whilst it's going well, is now obviously more urgent than ever with that rain coming. We've established 15 drop-off facilities for people to take their storm debris to. We've had 228 skip bins made available across the city. The bins are being removed and replaced when they're full. And we've taken almost 2,000 tonnes of flood-damaged household goods and material from curbsides, from the skip bins and from flexi bins to landfill since the 27th of January. So I think our plea is to Aucklanders at the moment is please avoid adding further items to curbside waste collection points that have already been cleared. As I said, we've still got the free drop-offs available at those 15 locations, and what's left on the berms, we're trying to get to these before Sunday. So if you do have to get rid of some stuff, please try and do so before Sunday.
How realistic is that, Desley? Can you give us a bit of an idea of what volume of material is still out there? Because we are showing some pictures at the moment for people who are watching rather than listening, and these were taken today and over the last 24 hours, and this stuff is piled sky high. It could be missiles in moving water. You know, it's dangerous.
Look, we don't know what we don't know. That's why we're asking people to call in. But we have got all our contractors working to collect that rubbish. We've got extra help from the likes of demolition companies who have capacity to help us. And my understanding is the Defence Force is out there collecting as well. So we have commissioned as much help as we can, and we do have a number of volunteer agencies helping with it as well. We're going to try and collect it before Sunday. It's a big job, and that's why we're asking Aucklanders if they can transfer any themselves, please do so before Sunday.
So what, is the Defence Force and others, are you just driving trucks around looking for the stuff on the side of the road, or how does it work?
Well, as we have spoken to Aucklanders about this, we are asking them to call in when they have put their rubbish outside to the 0800 22 22 00, and we are responding based on that information.
Right, so if you were getting people to basically call in and register, you must have some idea of volume of people waiting in the queue for a pickup.
I'd have to talk to emergency management about that. I know what has been picked up. And I know that the people in charge of that waste collection are aware of the pressure and the time pressure they have to pick it up. They have contracted extra support, and they have told me they are ready to collect it all before Sunday, provided there is no more rubbish put up where they have already gone and collected it.
Do you know how much help you're getting from the Defence Force? How many trucks, how many people?
I'm not off the top of my head, sorry. I can't tell you that.
The other issue is drains. So is someone going around making sure all the drains are clear?
Yes, drains are being cleared as part of the general clean-up. But, of course, as you can appreciate, that is a big job. And we have said it before and we'll say it again. If you have a drain outside your property and you can see it's full of leaves and twigs, please put some gloves on, take care, but if you can clear it, that would be a big help to us.
Again, we're showing a picture at the moment. This is an underpass in Ellerslie where the drain appears to be blocked pretty solidly, and not just from this flood because it's got stuff growing out of it, so it's been there for a while. I'm just wondering, how many drains have you got left to check, and are you going to get through them all?
Well, I'm sorry, I don't know how many we've got left to check. I don't know. I can't see the pictures you're showing. Sorry, I'm on my phone. But look, don't just look at something and think it's someone should do something about it. Please call it in. 0800 22 22 00.
Any information on how to clean a drain? Is there a DIY video or what the safe way is to do it and whether people should, be doing
We
it?
don't want people to pick up the grill and do anything that they shouldn't be doing. It's just, we're asking people if there is surface material on top of that drain, like sticks, twigs. Look, I've been clearing drains myself. I've seen clothing, litter from food, etc., plastic. They can be removed safely. Please do so, because drains do contribute to flooding without a doubt.
The Minister for Auckland is given a rough estimate north of $1 billion for the clean-up, he reckons. So what money are you asking the government for?
That discussion will take place. I know that Mayor has already spoken to the Prime Minister. I haven't been part of those discussions. I can't speak to that, sorry.
What kind of split do you reckon it should be, if not a number? You know, should
I'd love
it
it to
be
be
split
100%.
down the middle, Leslie?
Well, I don't even think it should be split down the middle. Look, I think...
Okay, well, give us an idea of what you think is the reasonable solution here.
We don't know what the final tally is, but they are saying that the event we've had, let alone the cyclone, is equivalent to, is the biggest non-earthquake event, we've had. So I think we should look to Christchurch. It's on that kind of magnitude. We should look at the help that they provided to Christchurch and try and get a similar figure for Auckland.
Right, so are you saying that they should pick up 100% of the bill?
I would love that.
Do you think that's realistic? Will you ask for that?
I think you always start with that, absolutely, yes.
Because people are getting their rates bills right now, Desley, and they'll be wondering what this means for their future rates bills, won't they? What do you think it means?
Well, that's another conversation, isn't it, Linda? I mean, we don't know the financial impact of the event to date. We are ready to go out very shortly on an annual plan consultation period. On an annual plan consultation. The consultation document will be signed off next week, and the consultation period will be from the 28th of February to the 28th of March. The flood is mentioned in that document, and there will be part of that budget money for associated with the events.
Appreciate your time, Desley. That's Desley Simpson, who's Auckland's Deputy Mayor there. It is almost 5:15. Kia mau tunu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. I want to hear from you if you're in a flood-damaged street. What's it looking like there on the berm? Have you got skips? Have you got rubbish that's piled up high? How long has it been there? Have you called in for a pickup? Text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. And you could take a photo and flick it through to us as well. The email address, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. As if the rental market wasn't already tight enough, there are now hundreds of renters left in flood-damaged houses, desperately searching for a new rental. So far, 277 homes have been red-stickered and over 1,600 are yellow-stickered. Advocates say landlords need to be clear on what's their responsibility when it comes to repairs and when their tenants can rightfully leave. Louise Tanuth reports.
Victoria's 8-bedroom flat in Kingsland was one of many affected in Auckland's torrential rain. Their downstairs section was flooded out twice, leaving them to try and clean up the damage themselves.
The owners came round and kind of didn't really offer us any solutions, didn't provide any extra heaters or dehumidifiers or fans to kind of air the place out. The smell was so bad and it's just been so damp ever since then.
While the flat is still habitable, the last 2 weeks have been miserable. Their lease is running out this Saturday and they don't want to stay on in a damaged place. The new flat they had lined up in St Mary's Bay has now been red-stickered. They've been frantically searching for a place to call home, but it's proving extremely difficult.
I went to a viewing on the Sunday just been and I was about 10 minutes early, but there was still at least 5 groups of people waiting outside already. As I'd made my way through the property, another I want to say at least 30 or 50 odd had shown up. That property got rented 3 hours after the viewing, it wasn't even a full day.
Come Saturday, they'll have to stay with family and friends. Because they were paying their rent in advance, their last payment went through on the first day of flooding. But there's been no conversation about discounting the last 2 weeks of rent. CEO of Consumer New Zealand, John Duffy, says that's something landlords need to be looking at.
There should be a discussion between the tenant and the landlord about whether reduced rent is appropriate, and that will really depend on how badly the property's been affected. And here we're talking about situations where the property's still habitable. Maybe the carpets need to be taken out.
He says any flood repairs are the responsibility of the landlord. If a house has been red-stickered and is totally uninhabitable, tenants can give 2 days' notice in writing to break their lease and stop paying rent. Landlords should have insurance, but any personal property is a renter's responsibility and needs to be covered with contents insurance. He's concerned for renters having to search for a new place in the middle of both a housing and cost of living crisis.
It is highly likely that with a reduction in supply, you'll see an uptick in price. There could be genuine reasons for landlords to be putting prices up. The insurance on the property goes up, they may have to pass that cost on to tenants. We would just be really disappointed if landlords were taking advantage of this situation.
Renters United is echoing this concern.
People who are desperate are more willing to accept bad conditions, an ideal tenancy arrangement. We expect that to have a very negative effect on the general state of tenants.
Spokesperson Ashok Jacobs says the group has been inundated with questions from renters about what their rights are. He says with the likelihood of reoccurring events in the future, tenancy laws need to better protect renters.
Extreme weather events as a result of climate change are obviously going to keep happening, and tenancy laws really just need to be updated to reflect a country where 50% of adults are renters.
The government's temporary accommodation service is available for people displaced by the flooding and is accepting registrations for those who need help to find somewhere to stay in the short term. As for those looking for something more permanent, they'll have to join the queues at open homes.
Louise Tanuth reporting there. A giant hole in a key state highway to the Coromandel Peninsula has left businesses there increasingly worried about their livelihoods. With State Highway 25A out of action indefinitely, holidaymakers face the long way round or steering clear of the region entirely. It's the second option that has locals worried, fearing a big drop in visitors will have a big effect on their lives and towns. Our reporter Tom Taylor and cameraman Nick Monroe have the story.
You don't go into instant panic, but you slowly start to think, oh my goodness, this could really have an impact on our economy and even on us as locals. Our lives are here.
The closure of the main trunk line to Tairua has left Andrea Johnson shell-shocked. She owns Manaia Kitchen and Bar on the main road and says she's had to put on a brave face for her customers and staff. But Manaia's revenue is down about 50% since the collapse of State Highway 25A. It's a tough pill to swallow given the hopes Andrea had pinned on this summer.
This is way worse than COVID, business-wise, because we just had no summer. We've literally had 8 weeks of rain.
Having struggled to hire enough staff for summer, she's now had to make cuts to their rosters. Although she's doing everything she can to keep them in work, she says targeted support, like the $5 million package assigned to Auckland businesses, would help.
It would be amazing if we got some government help, because I actually think that we're going to need it to get us through, because unfortunately a lot of us have missed out on the fat of profit fat this summer because of the bad weather as well. So it's kind of, been the perfect storm.
Across the road is Dave Fitton, who owns Pacific Harbour Villas. He says although some overseas tour groups are still booked in to stay in the coming months, bookings from Kiwis have dropped right off. About 60 cancellations came through hot on the heels of the highway slip. And of the hotel's 20 rooms, more than half were left empty over Waitangi weekend. Dave says locals have known about problems on the state highway for years and blames successive governments for inaction.
If you don't address the matters, they get worse. And this is what's happened here.
A trip from Auckland to Tairua would ordinarily take 2 hours. The collapse of the road means an extra hour, something Dave says might put holidaymakers off. He says the peninsula is important, and it's vital the road is fixed quickly.
This is just a special place that people from Auckland like to go to. And what you're doing, you're penalising Aucklanders as well as the people down here in the Coro.
But as business slumps on the eastern Coromandel, some towns to the west are experiencing an uplift. For any Aucklanders still travelling to holiday hotspots like Whangamata, Pauanui or Cook's Beach, the fastest route now takes them along State Highway 2 and through the Karangahake Gorge. For a town like Ngatea, that means a boon to business, with more people stopping along the way. Owner of the Glory Company Cafe, Andrea Logan, says business has picked up by about 25% since the slip.
It's what I need it to be back to 2019 times. Been hanging out for a little bit of a pickup, so we just hope it continues.
It's come as a small relief to her after years of COVID lockdowns and major roadworks that brought Ngatea almost to a standstill.
It's been really a 3-year impact, and we're just kind of coming out of that, although we still haven't recovered from that. So having that traffic through has been a little bit of a silver lining on this terrible time.
Waka Kotahi expects to provide more information tomorrow on the repairs to take place on State Highway 25A.
And if you were listening to that on radio, do check out the video version of that story from Tom and Nick. We'll put it on our webpage. It is 22 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. Kai or Whakaaro, we would love your feedback about anything you've heard on the program this evening. Let us know what you think about who should pay for Auckland's clean-up. Should it be entirely central government or a split between council and central government? 2101 on text. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Also interested in what it looks like in your street. If you're in a flood-damaged area, is there still rubbish on the berm? Have you called for a pickup? How long has it been there for? Let us know about that. 2101 on text. And the email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time to go to the headlines. Anea Marama, mena pitipiti kōrero.
Whawhate lava. Thank you, Lisa. Auckland's state of emergency has been extended for another 7 days ahead of Cyclone Gabrielle's expected arrival this weekend. The cyclone's set to hit the upper North Island on Sunday and be at its worst on Monday and Tuesday. The state of emergency in the Thames Coromandel district has also been extended for a week. The death toll from the earthquakes in southern Turkey and northern Syria has passed 12,000. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has defended the emergency response, saying it's not possible to prepare for disasters of such magnitude. In Syria, the group leading efforts to rescue people in rebel-held areas warns time is running out. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins denies Labour has lost its principles after jetsoning a host of policy promises, scrapping the RNZ-TVNZ merger and pushing back work on hate speech and its social insurance scheme. National Party leader Christopher Luxon says the government's playing cynical election year politics. Police in Nelson have arrested 2 people and seized firearms after a gang shooting last December. Detective Senior Sergeant Lex Bruning says search warrants were executed at Central Nelson Properties this morning. And the Financial Markets Authority is warning would-be investors about an event at Christchurch's Novotel Airport Hotel tonight. The authority says Webe Global and Leo are suspected Ponzi or pyramid schemes. It's 24 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Marama. Brendan McCullum admits it's a bit weird to be wearing England colours on New Zealand soil for the first time. The English Test side is here for the first time since the former Black Caps captain took over the coaching reins almost a year ago. And sports reporter Clay Wilson joins me now. So, still a bit strange, to see him in those colours?
Yeah, it's been 9 months. We've had a little bit of a chance to get used to it, but the first match for England, in New Zealand with Brendan McCullum as coach. You're talking about a guy who's played 430 odd games for New Zealand, was obviously captain, led that 2015 World Cup, amazing run to the final, scored the first triple century in Black Caps history. So to have him back here in New Zealand with those England colours on is a little bit different and extra strange in a way. But he seems to have been enjoying himself. He said he's been pretty much the tour guide. They spent a week in Queenstown, the England team, before they arrived in Hamilton. They've been playing golf and doing all sorts of things, so he's been loving showing the England guys around. And he said one of the keys to the success this team has had, and they've had a huge amount of success since he's taken over, they've won 9 of the 10 tests they've played in that time, has been the enjoyment. And so you talk about things like Queenstown, and he says things like that, the enjoyment they have off the field is important to their success on the field. Now, the term that's been thrown around since Brendan McCullum has been taken over is Bazball, this aggressive brand of cricket that England are playing, along with Ben Stokes, who's the new captain of the team as well. Now, he's not apparently the biggest fan of the term, but he does say that the sky is the limit for this team. And here's what he had to say when he got asked this morning about the recipe behind the incredible success this team has had in the past year.
Walk around the dressing room at trainings or wherever they go, they've got smiles on their faces and they're laughing and joking, and when they put their head down and start working, they put in the yards, and then it's a matter of being able to, in precious situations, be brave enough to allow that talent and that hard work and the enjoyment factor to come out. And if you do that, you don't know where the ceiling is. There'll be some tough times, no doubt, and that'll be intriguing how we handle those too. And I think with the skipper in charge, I'm not sure what's possible, because he's a guy who writes his own scripts.
Now, we've seen this new approach in action already here in New Zealand. They've been playing a 2-day game against a New Zealand 11 in Hamilton yesterday and today. England scored 465 runs at almost 7 and over. So they're clearly not going to change anything. So 2 tests against the Black Caps could be in for an exciting couple of tests. First test is a pink ball game as well, starting in Mount Wanganui next Thursday. So hopefully that weather that's on its way
by then.
will have swept through, and the Mount will be its glorious, splendid, usual self. himself for the start of that first test.
Okay, and a change of pace coming up this weekend for a young Kiwi who's a rising star in the world of motorsport. Who are we talking about?
Yes, this is Liam Lawson, who's a Red Bull junior driver, a name that a lot of New Zealand sports fans will recognise. And he's been slowly edging his way closer to a Formula One drive. He had 2 or 3 practice drives in the practice sessions of Formula One last year. He drove Max Verstappen's car in the last one of those. Now, last weekend he went to Bathurst, to Mount Panorama, the famous circuit there in Australia, and Red Bull bought one of their older Formula One cars, and he got to drive it around as a bit of an exhibition. Just an amazing experience for a young Kiwi kid like that, still just 21 years old. But this weekend he's going back to his roots. He's coming back to New Zealand and he's getting back in the kart. And of course, a lot of these drivers, that's what they start out in, at the local kart track. And he's racing. He's racing in the first 2 rounds of the National Series. He won the first round in Auckland, and he's racing in Hamilton this weekend. So great to see a young talent like that who's doing big things on the world stage, still likes to come back and get back in the kart and race against the top Kiwi drivers here in New Zealand. So he's going to do that, and then he's going to be back off to Europe. He's a reserve driver for Red Bull, so we have some duties there, hopefully a few more practice drives, and then he's racing in Japan this year. So big things, and hopefully, like I say, not too far away from getting locked in for that Formula One seat in the next year or 2.
Even bigger things to come. Thank you, Clay. Clay Wilson there. The struggle is real out here. That from a minimum wage school cleaner who welcomes the $1.50 an hour bump for Aotearoa's lowest earners. The government yesterday announced the minimum wage will go to $22.70 an hour from April, still trailing the living wage of $23.65. Auckland, Talesia, her husband and son are all on the minimum wage, and she says that sometimes means choosing between food and paying the power bill on time.
We are hoping for the living wage, but hey, that's better than nothing. Anything counts, because, price of food, petrol to get to work, car maintenance and things like that, it will make a whole lot of difference. Even though it's $1.50 per hour, but yeah, it does make a difference.
Tell us a little bit about your job.
At the moment, it's only just 4 hours, but we get paid fortnightly, and at the moment we're sitting at $21.50. So with that $1.50 a bit more, we're excited. Thank you. But it's still a bit of a struggle still with that $1.50 on top. I have a son, but he is not a cleaner. But with minimum wage, it's still not enough. I would say to livable, at the moment.
So tell me about paying your bills. When you get your paycheck and the money comes into the house, where does most of it go? How much are you left for food, for example?
We have pay for our car, rent, and food. And sometimes when the money comes into our hand and it gets to a situation where I have to choose whether to pay groceries or pay for my bills. Sometimes I have to hold that bill up, contact them to understand that, I rather have the food on the table for my family than spending that, on the bills where I could ask them just to, hold it for a bit.
Pretty stressful, eh?
Yes, it still is.
So what do you think of the cost of living at the moment? How much everything costs, including food?
Oh, it's ridiculous, but I mean, that's reality that we have to live with now. Each week we get paid fortnightly. So after tax, I am left on my hand about 500 and something.
How much of that goes on rent?
Rent is $5.95 a week.
Right.
So, yeah. So a fortnight, that's 1,000, more on top. So even though we do work, and I am currently having to look for a second job just to support, and contribute into my family.
Filling your car, how much does that cost you?
a day. Actually, my car don't get to see a full tank. It's sometimes have to day by day just to see, where it could get us, instead of just filling it up all at once, because sometime I might need that money for a little emergency on the side or something.
So what happens if a big bill comes up? Like if your car needs a repair or you have to get a warrant of a fitness or, do you have insurance?
Sometime when the warrant for fitness is out, we had to drive without it. We had to go without it, and hoping that we don't get busted on the road, get pulled over and get another fine. But it's just a risk that we had to take to be able to get by every week.
Can you afford insurance?
Insurance?
Yeah.
No. No.
So with all of that, an extra $1.50 an hour with a rise in the minimum wage, how much difference do you reckon it will make to your family?
It won't be that much of a difference, but, it's a little bit in there. But, I'm kind of hoping for the living wage, to make it livable and a little bit comfortable, for us.
What do you say to businesses who reckon they can't afford to go that high? They can't afford to pay the increase in the minimum wage and going to the living wage would be tough on them. What do you say to that?
Well, all I can hope for is for some kind-hearted for them to see that how does that some of us have to work to put some food and able to afford a shelter over the heads of our children. I'm kind of hoping that they would understand the struggle is real out here.
And that's Talasia, a cleaner working for the minimum wage. It is 26 minutes to 6. Kia mau tunu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It is time for the business news. Ko taku hoa e nai ko Nona Peltier. Nona joins us live in the studio. Let's talk about Mainfreight first. Shares in the transport and logistics company, which they are, taken a tumble. What's the reason for that?
Yeah, so they dropped about 3% at the end of the day, by the end of the day, I should say. But look, they put out a report first thing this morning saying that their first 3 quarters, so this is not a full year result that they're talking about, was satisfactory. I mean, satisfactory, revenue up 17% to $4.8 billion. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? As well as a before-tax profit for an 8-month period of $490 million. So it sounds satisfactory according to the company. However, they're warning that things have come off the boil in terms of freight. Don Braid, who is the managing director, has said that their Asian and American markets are coming off, and those lower volumes are starting to be felt by the company. So it's hard to know where this is going. I was just in an Uber earlier this morning, and I was talking to the Uber driver. He works in freight forwarding, and he said that his small companies that he serves, the business has completely disappeared. No one is importing stuff. So the supply chain issues that still exist are not as severe, I guess, or not as much of a factor, because really the economic slowdown is showing us that people are importing less, probably exporting less as well.
Okay, a softening in commercial traffic movements suggests the economy is already contracting. Tell us more, Nona.
Okay, so there's this thing called the Truckometer. Our very clever chief economist at the ANZ Bank, Sharon Zollner, created it, believe it or not, so many years ago. And it's proven to be a pretty good indicator of what's happening at the moment. That gives us a good snapshot of how the economy is literally traveling. And in this case, the heavy traffic index shows that there is still movement on the roads. Of course, it could be just trucks delivering garbage to the tips from all the flooding and damage and so forth. We don't know exactly. But the light traffic index is just more interesting in terms of what it's telling us about the market. Shows that further ahead, there's a sign that the consumer activity is falling. There's fewer people on the road. And that means that chances are it probably indicates we're already seeing a contraction in the market.
Okay, and numbers from the market, speaking of market.
Well, actually, I was at the market today. That's where I went with the Uber driver, as a matter of fact. And it was kind of interesting. I talked to a company that we don't talk about very much. It's called Pacific Edge. They do bladder cancer testing. Anyway, they've been listed on the NZX for 20 years today, or, well, they were celebrating today. But that company's never turned a profit, like ever. They're just a growth company. And I said, well, what do your shareholders think? He said, our shareholders love us because we deliver growth, and we've been doing that for 20 years. So there you go.
You're going to give me the dollar numbers?
Do you want them?
Go on then, quickly.
The top 50 index at ended down 93 points, 0.75%, so to 12,119. And the New Zealand dollar is little changed, 63.4 US cents, 91.1 Australian.
And let me guess, 52.8? No?
52.4.
Okay, pence. Thank you, Nona. Nona Peltier, we're with the business news. Been nicking from Netflix? Well, the free ride is coming to an end as the streaming service signals a crackdown on password sharing in New Zealand. It estimates up to 100 million subscribers have people outside of their household piggybacking on their accounts for free. To start, Netflix is bringing in restrictions in Canada, Portugal, Spain and Aotearoa. So how many of us are sharing our Netflix logins? We hit the streets to find out.
Do you have a Netflix account?
I use my dad's.
How many of you are on it?
There's 3 of us on it.
I do share one with my family.
I think it's my partner's dad's. I think all her siblings use it, so that's at least 5, and then their mum and dad, and then obviously their partners, because I'm using.
I think 6 plus whoever I have given the password to over the years, yeah.
We use somebody else's.
I do, but it is my parents.
My children have them and I share them with them.
Do you think that's fair? Is that stealing?
I mean, I didn't read the terms and conditions, so I'm not quite sure if it's stealing or not.
In this economy, absolutely. I see how they think it's not, but I also think that in some situations it is fair, like myself as a student using my parents' account. I think that's very fair enough.
Well, joining us now is technology commentator and chief executive of Gorilla Tech, Paul Spain. We're thieves, Paul, it seems. Petty thieves when it comes to Netflix.
Look, I think you could put that on Netflix. They've made it very easy and, in fact, have in the past encouraged sharing of accounts. So I don't think that they can blame anyone for being thieves.
So how is this going to work? How are they going to enforce it to stop people, squatting on a single subscription service?
Well, they're going to look at the IP address, which is the unique number of your home internet connection. And if you're using from other connections, they're going to expect you to have been on that home network within the last month. So as long as you're coming home on a regular basis, if you're streaming through a phone or a tablet, then that might work out okay. But if you're trying to share it across multiple homes, directly on the TV itself, then that's going to make it somewhat harder to share in the future.
You touched on this, Paul, but the whole selling point, part of the selling point for Netflix from the beginning was the idea that it was transportable, right? Take it wherever you go. You go to an Airbnb, go overseas, take your login with you, and away you go. You can have access to this material. It's going to really take a culture shift, isn't it?
Yeah, look, this is part of the beauty of Netflix. It's also part of their transition as a company because, they started out as a very well-funded tech startup that had, lots of money to spend on acquiring content, on acquiring a large customer base. Now they're moving to a point where shareholders are expecting them to make a profit. And so they're trying to, go through that challenging, transition that is common for these sorts of tech companies. And it's not a very easy one. And it could well lose them, a bunch of customers.
Yeah, because they're saying 100 million households, right, who've got others piggybacking on their accounts. That's a big dent in your business model. You talk about profit. They talk about having money to make better content. That's why they need us all to pay up.
Well, it's certainly part of the picture. If they don't have enough funds to have the best content, then that's another reason for us to unsubscribe. And I'm in the camp that doesn't have a current Netflix account, but I used to for years and years, even before it was officially available in New Zealand. So, there is a level of people that have already unsubscribed. There's that move to turn on and off the different video streaming services, as and when appropriate. So you might subscribe to one, 1 month, and then turn that off and subscribe to a different one, depending on what the trending content is or what you're interested in streaming.
Now, Paul, I'm not asking for explicit instructions for a smash and grab on Netflix, but I am curious, are there going to be workarounds for this?
There are always workarounds, and one of those is some sort of VPN where it looks as though you're part of your home network or your family network when you're not. Of course, the other competitor is pirated material, which is what a larger percentage of the population did before Netflix became available. And I've seen more and more people, especially over this last 2 or 3 years where times have been a bit tougher, where people are going back to, sharing hard drives of movies and TV programs or online sharing of content, through other sort of, somewhat dodgy mechanisms.
Good to talk to you, Paul. Thanks for joining us. That's Paul Spain. He's a technology commentator, chief executive of Gorilla Tech. It is almost 5:45. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Or Whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening on preparations for the cyclone coming, getting rid of the rubbish that's on the berms. Let us know about what's going on in your street, 2101, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. On a lighter note, are you squatting on someone's Netflix subscription? Are you stealing from Netflix? Let us know what you think. And does this mean you're going to drop your service, or are you going to start paying? 2101 on text, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The email address, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time to head over to the headlines. Ko marama anō tēnei.
Whaafetai lava. Thank you, Lisa. Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown says it will be a very serious situation if current forecasts for Cyclone Gabrielle eventuate. The cyclone is on course to hit Northland on Sunday night, bringing up to 200 millimetres of rain over 24 hours in Northland and Auckland, and up to 300 millimetres in Coromandel. Both Auckland and Thames Coromandel District have extended their state of emergency settings for another week. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has repeated his call for new and more powerful arms to fight Russia. He's been on a diplomatic tour that began in Britain and went on to Paris for discussions with President Emmanuel Macron and the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Russia is warning of ramifications if European nations supply Kyiv with warplanes. Back home, a Southland man has been charged with criminal damage after more than 200 trees planted to beautify the Tuatapere Public Reserve were deliberately poisoned. The 54-year-old is due in Invercargill District Court this month. The man who killed 23 people at a Texas Walmart has pleaded guilty to hate crime and firearm charges. Prosecutors say Patrick Crucius confessed to targeting Hispanic shoppers during the 2019 gun rampage. Crucius faces a state trial over the killings. And Netflix is today making changes to stop multiple people sharing one account. The move follows a year-long trial in Latin America. But tech commentator Paul Spain warns it could lead to more people illegally streaming and downloading TV shows and movies. It's 14 minutes to 6.
Ngā mihi e ho. Let's get to some of your feedback now. A number of you getting in touch. There's more bad weather potentially heading Auckland's way, although we don't know when it'll land or whether it'll be a direct hit. But people are being warned not to put any more rubbish on the berm and get it cleaned up because, well, things could go bad if there is more rain. Alan has got in touch saying, I'm listening to your interview with Auckland City Council. That's the Deputy Mayor, Desi Simpson. It sounds like they are basically waiting at the bottom of the cliff, this person says. Why am I so cynical when it comes to councils? We had a slip below our Nelson property last August and were told it would be hydro-seeded by the end of October. We're still waiting for that to happen. Others tell us that while she's dreaming, the drains are full of silt and rubbish. And Sally's got in touch to say, check your spouting is not blocked with dirt, leaves, bird nests, etc., as overflow of rainwater may fall on the ground away from buildings or inwards and run down inside walls. And on the subject of who should pay for the clean-up, a lot of you take exception to the comparison with the Christchurch earthquake, which is the comparison being made by the Deputy Mayor. Terry says the Auckland flood was as big as the Christchurch earthquake. That is bull, ... That woman obviously did not visit Christchurch after the earthquake. Her statement was insulting. Do keep your feedback coming, 2101 on text, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Auckland's flood clean-up could be north of $1 billion, according to the city's new minister. But what's not clear is how much of that bill will be split between the council and central government. Minister for Auckland, Michael Wood, says nothing's off the table for helping homeowners with written-off properties.
We will be, in the coming weeks, working really closely with insurers, with directly impacted property owners to have those conversations. These are conversations which are potentially life-shaping for people who have just faced a really serious event, so they're not ones to be rushed. And we also have to be, cognizant of the way in which we manage these questions around climate change, severe weather event, and where the liability falls, because there are potentially really big consequences dependent on the decisions that you start to make as more and more of these events start to happen. But we will work closely with all concerned to try and ensure that there's fairness in the system, that people are treated appropriately, and that we prepare ourselves for these events as they might happen in the future.
But the government picking up a tab for some homes that shouldn't be rebuilt, that can't get insured and are unlivable, it's not off the table, is it?
Well, look, we're certainly not putting anything in or out in that area at the moment. The first port of call, obviously, for people who have insurance is to work with their insurers. That is why people undertake insurance, and we encourage people to do that. But we'll continue working with affected people and the affected regions more generally as we deal with some of the more complex cases that will arise out of this.
How much money do you reckon you need to kick into Auckland? And I just want to get an idea of how you are viewing this situation. Do you think it should be treated the same as the Christchurch rebuild and recovery?
In terms of the first part of your question, which is what might the bill for this be, that information is still being gathered by the agencies who are responsible for the assets. So I've met, for example, with Waka Kotahi today, who face extensive damage to the network, and in that case, mainly actually out of Auckland and Northland and the Coromandel, for example. Auckland Transport obviously has extensive damage across its roading network, and we're working closely with them, but it's just a little bit too early to actually tally up what we think that rebuild is going to cost. But we're working really closely with Auckland Transport there. In terms of how we respond at a higher level, this is an event of a significant scale. It will almost certainly across the private and the public infrastructure be well north of $1 billion worth of damage. We just have to assess exactly what that is. So in terms of the government response and support we will provide, that is going to require a high level of coordination, whether it's across the rebuild of physical infrastructure, whether it's supporting people with those insurance issues, whether it's going to be the ongoing welfare needs of people who are not going to be able to get back into their homes for some time. We're very clear that this isn't a business as usual response. It requires a level of leadership and coordination, which, as you note, is what we had in both Christchurch and Kaikoura, and that will be part of my work in the weeks ahead.
As an Auckland ratepayer, would you expect your rates to go up in the wake of this?
I simply can't answer that. That's obviously a question for the council. There is no doubt that there is going to be a significant cost which will come to the council and likely come to central government as a result of the damage.
What should the split be, Minister?
Work through how that is done.
What should the split be? If you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars into the billions, what should the split be for responsibility? How much of that do you reckon the government will end up picking the tab up for?
Well, look, the government is prepared to shoulder up and support Auckland through this period, but we are simply not at the point where we're able to quantify or start talking about cost splits here. Obviously, we have the infrastructure that we are directly responsible for, which in this case is primarily across the transport network, where we are committed to restoring connection. So, for example, for the people in Coromandel who are really disconnected because of the damage to State Highway 25. We're going to make sure that we restore that connection for people, and that will be a significant cost. And we will then get alongside and work with Auckland Council in the coming weeks as they assess the damage, the level of it, to ensure that we provide appropriate support. But we're just not in a position at this stage to talk about the costs and the cost share. The most important thing is that people know that their government will back the city and back the affected regions to restore connections and all of those other things that have been so badly damaged.
And that's Minister for Auckland, Michael Wood, there saying the damage, upwards of $1 billion. Who should pay? Text us on 2101. It is 8 minutes to 6. Kia mau tunu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Voters in Tauranga got a taste of the 2023 election campaign today with both of the Chris's out and about in the electorate. The leaders of both major parties hit the road, talking to locals and exchanging barbs over whinging and wasteful spending. Our political reporter, Annika Smith, has more.
All right, kia ora everybody. It's great to be here in Tauranga today.
Prime Minister Chris Hipkins in election campaign mode already, visiting Maunga Tapu homes damaged in recent weather events and stopping in to a local skills and employment hub. Fresh off the back of the start of his policy reset and already defending the money spent on now binned policies.
So I wouldn't necessarily characterise money that's been spent on some things where we're changing direction as being money that has been spent on something that's not going to happen.
The RNZ-TVNZ merger has been fully scrapped. Hate speech laws kicked down the road, income insurance scheme put on ice, and the Three Waters reforms are in limbo. The government estimates axing and delaying policies will free up hundreds of millions of dollars. But this Tauranga constituent is worried about the money already spent.
It was good that they've backtracked, but a lot of wasted money in doing that.
Nationals leader Christopher Luxon is also worried. Hard on the attack today, he says the Prime Minister should own up to wasting taxpayer money.
Chris Hipkins has been part of this Labour government and been part in that engine room with Jacinda Ardern and Grant Robertson driving all of this agenda. And it's rather disingenuous and some clever Jedi mind trick, really, if you say that actually I've got nothing to do with that and now I believe this.
Chris Hipkins is standing by his renewed focus on the economy and clear he doesn't see the time, money and energy put into the now binned reforms as a waste.
The investment that we made in those policies in many cases is going to inform what we do now. Just because we're changing direction doesn't mean that that much of that investment is wasted.
And he wants to know what Mr Luxon believes in.
I've come to accept that the National Party just like to sort of whinge and moan about things. It's difficult to kind of have a contest of ideas with them when they don't really seem to have any.
Some barbs thrown around today, so what do the public think of Chris and Chris?
I'm pretty much a swing voter. Don't stick to one side of politics or the others. I still think there's a lot of big ticket policy issues that aren't being properly addressed by any party.
It's nice to see a change in leadership for Labour, but whether that changes their entire waste of spending remains to be seen.
I have no cause to favour one side or the other currently. We'll see what happens. There's a lot of work can be done over the next few months before the election.
Chris Hipkins is poised to further shake up the government's agenda in the coming weeks, while the National Party will unveil a new policy this weekend.
Annika Smith reporting. It is a common and even unwelcome sight in lawns throughout New Zealand, but the tall stalks and blackheads of plantain could help clean up the country's waterways, according to a dairy industry trial. Our reporter Jimmy Allingham has more.
New research at Massey University in Palmerston North has shown adding the leafy herb to cows' grazing crops can reduce the amount of nitrogen escaping from dairy farms into waterways by 20 to 60%. What is this wonder plant? Glenn Judson from crop and pasture company Agricom explains.
If you Google it, you might find the banana, right? So that it's unrelated. So plantain is Plantago lanceolata. So the Plantago species, we call it a narrow leaf plantain. So it's got a long, narrow leaf. It's got ribs down that leaf. So sometimes it's called ribwort plantain. So it's got ribs down the leaf. And the telltale is the seed head, which is basically on a long stalk, and there's a kind of a black seed head.
And importantly for the dairy industry, does it have any effect on milk production?
What we normally have in some of these technologies is we get a good effect in terms of nitrate leaching, for example, but there's a payoff somewhere, right? And we have to accept lower productivity or some other issue. In this case, the productivity, the sort of catchphrase is that it's never any less than you'd get from a normal pasture, and sometimes more.
Dairy NZ has led the funding for $22 million trials at Massey and Lincoln universities. The industry body's chief executive, Dr. Tim McCullum, says it's important to have the universities and farmers involved for credibility.
Dairy farmers are always looking for solutions to farm better. Environmental sustainability is a key driver for them, and for us as a dairy sector, it's important to them and their communities. And today we're talking about an exciting solution. I think this will be a game changer.
A game changer thanks to a change in cows' toilet habits. Nitrate, a form of nitrogen from cows' urine, can leach into waterways and cause the growth of nuisance algae while removing oxygen. Massey Professor Peter Kemp says plantain makes cows relieve themselves more, which is a good thing.
So the nitrogen concentration in the urine's lower, but there's more from a cow when it's eating plantain, which means that it urinates more often. But that spreads the nitrogen over a greater area, so it's more dilute, and there's less in total anyway.
Professor Kemp says he's confident farmers will adopt plantain.
I think it will happen quickly because, one, it's not a radical change to a system, it's just adding something into the pasture. The other reason is, from what I've seen with the farmers I'm involved with, huge commitment to obviously meet the nitrogen leaching regulations.
Dennyvirk dairy farmer Thomas Reid already uses plantain on his 3 operations of over 500 hectares. He plans to plant more of it among the usual feeds and says it's piqued the interest of fellow farmers.
I had one guy say, oh hell no, I don't want anything to do with this, come and had a look at our trial on farm and saw what we're doing. Within the next year he's already tried to adopt over 40% of his farm in a quick turnaround. So yeah, look, the guys within the Tararus are picking up this pretty fast, and it's not just in the Tararus, it's across New Zealand.
So as many regions tighten environmental regulations, it's oh hell yes for plantain.
Let's get to some of your feedback now on the minimum wage. This person says there's disparity around minimum wage reporting. Media more often report on the minimum wage from a rich person's perspective. Let's get more interviews like Talasia, that is a cleaner we interviewed earlier in the program, who is on minimum wage. On the subject of Netflix, this person says, I use my ex-flatmate's sister's Netflix account. Lawrence is despairing. Lawrence says, I'm halfway through the last Netflix Series 4 of The Crown. What a pain. I may have to buy my own subscription. Lawrence, I'll let you know how it ends if you like. And another person says, I'll drop Netflix if I can't share it with my child who's away at uni.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Marama Tipole. Auckland's Deputy Mayor is calling for government funding for Auckland's clean-up to be close to that given to Christchurch after the quakes. Desley Simpson told Checkpoint the event is being described as equivalent to the biggest non-earthquake event the country has had. She says Auckland should look at the help the government provided to Christchurch and try to get a similar figure for Auckland. Meanwhile, Auckland Council says it's doing all it can to clear the streets of flood-damaged rubbish before Cyclone Gabrielle strikes. The city's state of local emergency is being extended for another 7 days ahead of the next storm, which is likely to start in Northland on Sunday. Auckland and the Coromandel Peninsula will be next in line for heavy rain and wind. The Deputy Mayor says the council is trying to collect the rubbish before Sunday.
We've got extra help from demolition companies who have capacity to help us, and my understanding is the Defence Force is out there collecting as well. So we have commissioned as much help as we can, and we do have a number of volunteer agencies helping with it as well.
Desley Simpson says Auckland's drains are also being cleared as fast as possible. Auckland Council was to urgently commission an investigation into the medium and long-term impacts of the anniversary weekend floods. It will look at what it may mean for planning the city's land use and infrastructure. The Ukrainian president travels to Brussels from France tonight, aiming to push EU leaders for more weapons in the fight against Russia's invasion. Russia is warning of ramifications if European nations supply Kyiv with warplanes. The BBC's Lucy Williamson is in Paris.
France and Germany could be game changers, Mr Zelensky said, by providing Ukraine with battle tanks, modern fighter planes and long-range missiles. We've gone through many trials together over the past year, he said, and praised Europe's unity in the face of Russia's invasion. President Macron said that Ukraine could count on France, which stood ready to continue weapons supplies. The crime of aggression cannot be tolerated, Mr. Macron said. Russia cannot win the war.
National Party leader Christopher Luxon still plans to do public meetings despite a recent one being derailed by anti-vax and anti-mandate protesters. A public meeting in the Canterbury town of Rangiora was cut short on Tuesday after a Q&A session was hijacked by anti-vaxxers and he was confronted on his way out of the venue. Christopher Luxon says he respects people's right to express their views to him but condemned their message.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm not supportive of that message at all, but people's ability to be able to come and, irrespective of whatever their issues are, and be able to raise them with me, I think is a good thing.
Christopher Luxon says he intends to spend as much time out of Wellington as possible and wants to do several public meetings a week. Health authorities in China are reporting a steep drop in the number of severe COVID cases and deaths. It's raised hopes the economy could bounce back quickly. Our correspondent Patrick Fock reports.
According to China's Centre for Disease Control and Prevention, daily fatalities at hospitals across the country fell by 102 as of Monday, down from more than 4,000 on January 4th. Severe hospitalised cases slid to 2,000, down from a peak of 128,000 at the start of January. The figures signal a significant improvement in China's battle with the virus, and economists expect a pickup in the economy if it continues in that direction. Still, China's COVID data has been under severe scrutiny. Authorities have also revealed considerable progress in immunisation. More than 90% of the population has now received at least 2 doses of the vaccine.
Back home, 2 men have been arrested and firearms seized in Nelson over a gang shooting last December. Detective Senior Sergeant Lex Bruning says officers searched several central Nelson properties this morning. A sawn-off shotgun and a cut-down .22 rifle were seized, along with ammunition, illegal drugs and drug utensils. A 32-year-old man will face drugs-related charges and a charge of accessory after the fact relating to the shooting, which another person is already in custody over it. A 35-year-old man will face firearms, family harm and drug-related charges. Police say further arrests have not been ruled out. And a Southland man has been charged following the deliberate poisoning of more than 200 trees in a public reserve. The trees were planted initially to beautify the area and to its apere, but were intended to be harvested eventually to benefit the community. A 54-year-old man has been charged with criminal damage. He's due to appear in Invercargill District Court later this month. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, will Diane's rage survive the trip to Wellington? We continue with our reading of Donna Mullane's My Brother's Keeper. And what are those daddy longlegs up to in the corner? Claire Concannon dips into the sex life of spiders on Our Changing World. She'll be speaking to researchers from the University of Waikato who are studying the mating behaviours of a group of 4 spiders in New Zealand. And plenty of spiders in the bush. Our forest correspondent Dean Bajent Mercer drops in for a chat. It's all on Nights with Karen Hay after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
RNZ National funded through New Zealand On Air. Lisa Owen and Checkpoint back in a minute. But right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. For the western regions, from Northland to Whanganui, including Bay of Plenty, Taumarunui and Taupo, mainly fine with isolated showers, clearing today, but returning tomorrow with cloud increasing. Taihape and Manawatu, also Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. A few showers spreading northwards this evening. Isolated heavy falls and possible thunderstorms, mainly about the ranges, easing this evening, then clearing tomorrow, except about Gisborne. Horowhenua to Wellington, also Wairarapa, Marlborough and Nelson. Fine spells with isolated showers clearing for the North Island regions today and elsewhere tomorrow morning. Now for Bulla and Weston, mainly fine, isolated coastal showers moving inland tomorrow. For Canterbury and Otago, isolated showers today, mainly fine tomorrow, but isolated showers returning south of Christchurch from the afternoon. Now for Southland and Fiordland, a few showers for you, mainly about the coast and Stewart Island. And for the Chatham Islands, fine spells with 1 or 2 showers for today. RNZ National, it's 6 minutes past 6.
Kia ora rā e ho, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Rental vehicles are in steaming hot demand after hundreds of cars were ruined in the Auckland floods. More than 2,500 vehicles swamped during the recent rains had to be towed from the city's streets. That's meant a rush on rentals. Well, joining us now is Rental Vehicle Association CEO Ben McFadgen. Kia ora, Ben. What are my chances right now, do you reckon, of getting a rental vehicle in Auckland?
Kia ora, Lisa. It's slim to none, but it's not just Auckland, it's pretty much nationally. So, we've got peak season, we've got very, very high demand for rental vehicles at the moment. We've had lots of people coming over from the US, Europe and Australia, and they've wanted a rental car. Now, we're at 65% recovery from COVID, so we've still got 40% to go before we get to pre-COVID levels. We've got supply chain issues with supply of parts and windscreens, which means vehicles are off the road for longer. So whilst, we've got a problem with Auckland, that's just only a small pimple, if you will, on top of a very large boil.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's unpack some of that, Ben, because that's a lot. So the situation with the flooding in Auckland, what knock-ons has that meant for you? Did some rental cars get destroyed?
No. I mean, we actually did pretty well in terms of the depots. The rental cars had to be moved, yes. There were some rental cars that might have been out on rental that had issues, were flooded and so on. We've also had logistical issues where people use rental vehicles to get out of Auckland, or when they couldn't get back to Auckland, they left them in other parts of the country. So getting them back to Auckland for now, to replete the fleet is difficult. So it's a combination of factors that have been exacerbated, I guess, in Auckland by the flooding.
And what do you mean when you say you're at 65% pre-COVID capacity? What happened with cars during COVID?
Well, during COVID, the rental vehicle operators obviously weren't utilising the vehicles, so they defleet, and they defleet every year. So you have a peak season during the summer, and then obviously there's a small peak in the winter. They've got to hold a fleet over for the skiing season. But other than that, they defleet generally.
So what, sell them, Ben, outright? Get rid of them?
That's one of the benefits to New Zealand, I guess, is that they go straight into the used car market, and they're relatively new vehicles. Well, they are only a few months old. And so that improves emissions for the market generally in terms of a new vehicle. Because the average age of a vehicle in New Zealand at the moment is, 14 years?
So they haven't restocked since getting rid of excess cars during COVID?
Haven't been able to, Lisa. We've had all sorts of things going on internationally, not just with COVID and the pandemic affecting the manufacturing capacity. We've also had the Ukraine, which has, affected some of the supply chain in terms of the electrical control units that you use in vehicles. There were problems with, Mercedes, Audi, BMW, even Lexus. They couldn't get some of the parts. And so, for example, for a while there, an Audi Q7 had a roll-down window. And that's a luxury Audi vehicle. You'd expect an electric window, not happening. So they've all pivoted to try and find different suppliers, but that's taken time. And there are problems getting it to New Zealand because of other priorities around the world for those suppliers, because other countries are experiencing exactly the same thing as we are.
Well, Ben, it seems like that's just going to get worse, isn't it? Because I imagine, given the extent of the damage to vehicles in Auckland, there's going to be a whole lot more people in the market trying to buy cars, isn't there?
Yeah, well, I guess so, and that's something that the used car market's got to deal with, the importers have got to deal with as well. I mean, it's wider than, I guess, just the rental market if you think of it like that. Yeah.
So is there no fat anywhere where you could transfer some vehicles up to Auckland in the meantime?
No. Right, not. We've got, what's happening even in Christchurch at the moment is not just high demand, but unique demand. We're getting demand now that's higher than Christmas. Okay, so this coming weekend is very high demand in Christchurch. There's very high demand all over the country. The following weekend, the demand's even higher. We've never seen this before. And so this is all part of the unique situation that I guess New Zealand's experiencing with the COVID recovery and with the opening of the borders. We literally switched on the taps and we've had people pouring in over the border, and yet our own infrastructure, we haven't had the capacity to deal with it. And that's been, you've heard about it all through hospitality, bus and coach industry, you name it. So, this is all part of, I guess, evolution or adjusting to the new normal.
So what does that mean for the cost of hiring a car then?
Well, obviously, when you've got supply and demand challenges, basic economics is that the prices go up in order to control the demand.
So, hen's teeth or the winning lotto ticket? Got a better chance of that at the moment, Ben, than getting myself a nice rental car this evening in Auckland?
Yeah, pretty much. I'd go buy a lotto ticket and have a much better chance than getting a rental vehicle, yeah.
Appreciate your time, Ben. That is Ben McFadgen, who's from the Rental Vehicle Association. Let us know if you've been trying to hire a car in Auckland or other parts of the country and come up against problems. 2101 on text. The Turkish president has now visited the disaster zone in his country as criticism grows over the official response to the massive earthquakes. More than 15,000 people are now confirmed dead, and families in badly hit areas in both Turkey and Syria say they've had no help digging out relatives from the rubble. The BBC's Anna Foster has this report from southern Turkey, and just a warning, some may find it distressing.
The devastating power of the earth. Swathes of this city lie in ruins. Buildings, homes, lives have been destroyed. In many cities, the search now isn't for survivors. It's only for the dead. When the rubble shows a sign, the digger stops. Behind this blanket, an arm reveals a body. Slowly, carefully, it's uncovered. And then, the moment of realization. A father lost. The goodbye is painful and public. And here in Marash, ambulances are now hearses. They've spent the whole day here searching for bodies, and the light is starting to fade now. But the rescuers say that they will come back tomorrow, and the next day they will return to sites like this for as long as it takes to return loved ones to their relatives. They're rare now, but there are still moments of hope. A little girl, healthy and alive after 3 days buried. The rescuers celebrate. She says her siblings are down there too. Today, President Erdogan came to visit those who've lost everything. But there's growing anger that help is coming too slowly, and there isn't enough of it. He says it's impossible to prepare for disasters on this scale.
We had some problems in some places like airports in the beginning. We had problems on the roads, but it's better today and it will be even better tomorrow.
Bodies now fill this sports hall. More are arriving all the time. Among them, Eunice's fiancé. They were just weeks away from getting married.
I was planning to dress her with a wedding dress, but now I'll dress her with a funeral shroud. I'm like the walking dead. I'm a living dead. I lost my feelings.
Each of these bundles marks a future cut short. A family separated. Every hour, the death toll rises. And even now, it's impossible to know how many lives this quake has claimed.
In Syria, aid workers are leading efforts to rescue people in rebel-held areas, but they say time is running out to find survivors. A long-running civil war has already destroyed much of the country's infrastructure and exacerbated this latest disaster. The UN says a critical aid route between Turkey and Syria may be passable by tonight. The BBC's Jeremy Bowen has this report.
Something to celebrate at last in a place without much good news. A family of 6 was rescued alive from the rubble in Idlib, the last part of Syria still controlled by rebels. The rescuers, a group called the White Helmets that the UK helps to fund, are experts. They've been digging out survivors of the Assad regime's airstrikes for much of Syria's long war. The geological faults that brought down these buildings cut right across the front lines and zones of influence that have devastated Syria since 2011. This is Aleppo, Syria's biggest city, back in regime hands since the rebels here were defeated in 2016. Now Syria has a huge natural disaster on the back of the man-made catastrophe that broke the country. In Aleppo hospital, every bed has its own tragedy. Only 3 members of this man's family survived when their home collapsed. 13 of them were killed. They were, he says, my father, my mother, my brother, his wife, and their 4 children. And the wife and 2 kids of the brother who was rescued with me also died. Faced with such disaster, the UN, which already helps care for millions of Syrians, appealed for some national solidarity.
We're hoping that everybody puts the interest of the people first. We keep the politics aside. We move the authorities, all authorities, move away from the issue, from the politics, and put the interest of the people first.
In Damascus, the capital, citizens are rallying around, giving blood. So far, grassroots relief efforts seem to be the best hope. It is not clear whether aid collected or delivered in Damascus will make it across the front line into rebel-held Idlib province. Back in Aleppo, Russian troops whose intervention salvaged the rule of the Assad family are helping the Syrian Red Crescent alongside Algerian rescue workers. The Damascus regime says its allies, also including Iran, are flying in aid. Allies and who controls what won't matter much to families who are homeless or nervous about sleeping in damaged buildings. An earthquake tests any nation's resilience. War has taught a generation of Syrians that they have to fend for themselves.
UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has hinted he may agree to Ukraine's demand for fighter jets. If that happens, Russia is warning of ramifications. President Volodymyr Zelensky is on a trip to Europe to ask for more supplies and has just visited the UK for the first time since Russia invaded. The BBC's Chris Mason reports.
The leader of a country at war arrives, a leader grateful for the UK's help and asking for more. The Prime Minister greeted President Zelensky off the plane. It's the UK he has chosen for only his second foreign trip since the full-scale war began almost a year ago. The face and voice of Ukraine, President Zelensky arriving in Downing Street with the Prime Minister.
Mr. Zelensky, do you want British fighter jets next?
The answer to that is yes, he does. In the Commons later, a consensual feel, and from the Prime Minister, a promise to train pilots, but no mention of planes.
Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted that President Zelensky is here in the United Kingdom today. It is a testament to the unbreakable friendship between our 2 countries, and I'm proud that we are expanding the training for Ukrainian forces to include jet pilots and Marines.
This House is honoured to be addressed today by President Zelensky. Yeah. From the outset of the war, he has symbolised the heroism, the resolve and the bravery of his people.
The Pope, Nelson Mandela and Charles de Gaulle are among those who have spoken here in Parliament's Westminster Hall. Today, the turn of President Zelensky. This is what support for Ukraine and its cause, in broad terms, looks and sounds like here. And the President wanted to say thank you for the UK's help from the moment the war escalated last February.
All of you all showed your grit and character back then, strong British character. You didn't compromise Ukraine, and hence you didn't compromise your ideals, and thus you didn't compromise the spirit of these great islands. Thank you very much.
Intelligence reports suggest Russia is mobilising for a major offensive in Ukraine in the coming weeks. Russian forces are already pushing hard in the east, reported to be closing in on the city of Bakhmut after 6 months of shelling. The BBC's Orla Guerin reports.
On the battlefields around Bakhmut, we follow Ukrainian National Guardsmen hunting for the enemy. Every minute counts. Russian forces are attacking from 3 sides.
So, the safest place here in the front line, because we have 1.5 kilometers for the Russian troops. Now you're here. We will fly with the drone and try to find somebody.
And if they find Russian forces, they will drop this modified German grenade, held in place with a bit of Velcro.
We know that here a lot of Russian soldiers walking, living, sitting, and so on. So we just give them some gift, and you will see the boom. And yes, here it was our grenade.
It's time for us to move now that the drone is back and the grenade has been dropped. We can't stay in this location for more than 2 or 3 minutes because there's a risk that we'll be targeted here. Inside Bakhmut, few dare to venture out. It feels like a city on borrowed time. But some still survive here in their basements, in the depths of war. In this darkness, we find a bright spark, 7-year-old Anna. She lives with her mother, grandfather, 2 cats, and a dog called Mushka. She's happy to see a familiar face, Pavlo from the White Angels, a Ukrainian police team. Anna knows how to spring a trap. It can bite, she says. I sit in the cellar almost all day long, she tells me. In the street, I walk and take Mushka for a walk. But she's afraid of the booms and constantly comes back. Only in the morning, at dawn, when it's quiet, I can take her out. Anna's mother, Yulia, has turned down police offers of evacuation. She says nowhere in Ukraine is safe and she can't afford to go abroad. All Pavlo can do is keep Anna warm with a new sleeping bag and hope she survives another night as Russian forces try to shell this city into submission.
And to Australia now, surveillance equipment linked to the Chinese Communist Party is being removed from Australian government departments and agencies. The cameras have already been banned in the US and the UK over spying concerns. The ABC's Rachel Hayter has more.
Surveillance cameras installed to keep buildings, information and people safe could be being used as spyware by the Chinese Communist Party.
There is an issue here and we're going to deal with it.
The Defence Minister, Richard Marles, has confirmed hundreds of devices built by companies linked to the CCP will be removed from Commonwealth government buildings.
I think it is right to be doing the assessment and making sure that we deal with it, and that's what we're going to do. I mean, it's a significant thing that's been brought to our attention and we're going to fix it. It's obviously been there, I might say, for some time, and and predates us coming into office. But that said, it's important that we go through this exercise and make sure that our facilities are completely secure.
It was prompted by an audit requested by Liberal Senator James Patterson, which revealed more than 900 devices on buildings including the Defence and Foreign Affairs offices made by Hikvision and Dehua.
These are companies who are ultimately beholden to the Chinese Communist Party and subject to the National Intelligence Law of 2017, which says that all Chinese citizens and all Chinese companies must secretly cooperate with Chinese intelligence agencies if asked. So we would have no way of knowing if the sensitive information, images and audio collected by these devices are secretly being sent back to China against the interests of Australian citizens.
Senator Patterson says it's not just an issue of national security, but of morality too.
These are companies who are intimately linked to the human rights abuses against Uyghurs in Xinjiang. These are companies who have been banned by the United States and the United Kingdom, our closest security allies.
Alastair McGibbon is the Chief Strategy Officer of CyberCX and a former federal cybersecurity advisor. He's welcomed the removal of the surveillance equipment, but says it must be expanded.
If there's enough risk associated with these cameras around a federal government building, doesn't that same risk apply to critical pieces of infrastructure in Australia? What about the privacy of Australians in hotels, lift lobbies or other such places? We have to apply the same standard to protect all Australians, not just federal government buildings.
Could these cameras have already been used for the CCP's purposes?
Yes, it could and would have been used already. We know that certain of these devices will send images back by default and others will have flaws or features that would allow for access to those cameras. We know it is the world's largest surveillance state and we know it's avaricious when it comes to data. Why not blind the Chinese Communist Party today, even if we didn't do it yesterday? It is time to take firm action on anywhere we think there is surveillance risk beyond the federal government, but to all Australians.
Alastair McGibbon says people who China considers a threat are especially vulnerable.
It's Uyghurs, it's pro-democracy activists from Hong Kong, for example. It's anyone that criticises the China state. It's the collection of intellectual property for the purposes of advancing China state. There's a whole range of reasons why China would and could take this information.
And that is about all we have got time for this evening. Now, the Late News team's going to keep you updated throughout the night, so do stay tuned. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a pōpō, and tomorrow from 5 a.m. on First Up, an archive of rare 19th and 20th century New Zealand photographs worth a small fortune goes on the market. First Up speaks to the owner. That'll be an interesting one, so do tune in, 5 a.m. on First Up. Kei te hoki mai anō a pōpō whānau, pō Mārie. We'll catch you tomorrow, Friday.
RNZ News headlines, it's 6:30. Minister for Auckland Michael Wood has warned the bill to repair flood-damaged public and private infrastructure could exceed $1 billion. Meanwhile, Civil Defence says it's worried about incoming tropical cyclone Gabrielle. The cyclone's forecast to touch Northland this weekend and the central North Island early next week. Russia's warning of ramifications if European nations supply Kyiv with warplanes. It comes after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met the leaders of Britain, France and Germany to seek new and more powerful arms. And health authorities in China are reporting a steep drop in the number of severe COVID cases and deaths, raising hopes the economy could bounce back quickly. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
I'm Catherine Ryan. On 9 to noon tomorrow, escaped pet parrots are threatening native species. Why an ecology professor is keen to see imports banned. We play tracks from a new album stacked with songs from the British post-punk scene. And we meet the whānau who don't just play together, they write plays together. When Auckland went into COVID lockdown in 2021, actor Tainui Tukiwaho wanted to find a way to keep his 5 tamariki busy. The result was an award-winning play. With me on 9 to noon on RNZ National.
It's time for Trending Now on RNZ National. I'm Todd Zahner. It's 29 to 7. Today on The Detail, roads up and down the country have taken a hammering after a summer of storms. Who pays the repair bill?
Kia ora, I'm Tom Kitchen, and today on The Detail.
The main road between Blenheim and Nelson could be closed for months.
Initial assessments show parts of State Highway 6 have been completely wiped out.
Northlanders say slow progress on their region's broken roads is going to cost lives and keep a chokehold on the region's economy. The indefinite closure of the Mangamuka Gorge for the second time in as many years has them asking why State Highway 1 isn't held to the same standard in Taitokoro as it is in other parts of the country.
East coasters are cleaning up after last week's weather hit, and along State Highway